democracy launched the worldwide disclosure movement. There are now dozens of countries that are releasing their files. France has, Denmark has, New Zealand has, Chile has, Mexico has. The United Kingdom is starting to. Where's the United States? Land of the brave and the free. Well, we're lagging because the United States is the crown jewel of the secret government that's made all of us slaves on somebody's plantation. And we're all here to say it's time for an Emancipation Proclamation in 2011. Now, some of my advisors don't want me to talk like this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. The truth is, as my friend and astronaut Brian O'Leary has said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And we're going to go through a lot of information today. And the first thing I want to go through is an update on the Disclosure Project. Many of you know that since 1992, I have been providing briefings to senior members of the United States and other governments, the United Nations Secretary General, and people like that. I'm a country doctor from North Carolina, emergency doctor by training. And my uncle designed the lunar module, put the first man on the moon. Yes, we went. No, you were not told what happened when we went. That's another discussion. If you want to hear about it, we'll talk about it. Now, in the course of making contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations, which is what we're really going to go into today, is how all of you need to stand and say, I am an ambassador from Earth to these other civilizations. I am here to end the embargo and the secrecy by making direct contact, because you know what? You can do it. It's very easy. And this is what got the attention of the head of Army Intelligence in 1992 when we were out on a beach in Florida, like we're going to be in Orange County next week. Those of you who want to come join us Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're going to be at this private state park we have. And we're going to actually be going out and making contact. Now the problem is that they don't want you to know that you can do this. They want you to think that you really need Big Brother to be interlocutors and intermediaries between humanity and these civilizations. The reality is, and where I got into a lot of trouble, was by discovering the Rosetta Stone of contact. And it has to do with what this conference is about, consciousness. The non-local field of awareness whereby everyone in this room is awake. And it is a singularity, this mind, that we all share. And once you understand how to go into that samadhi state, remote view distant places, and make contact with linear coherent thought that is going through this omnipresent field of awareness, there's nothing the CIA can do. There's nothing Army Intelligence can do. And there's nothing the President can do or not do. Because guess what? The entire universe is folded within every single one of us in its totality. Let me repeat this. It's a wonderful saying from the Sufi tradition. Thinkest thyself a puny form, when within thee the universe is folded. The entire universe is folded within every single person. Why? How? Because by being awake, you can become aware of the non-local, omnipresent mind. And that is omnipresent. And that means everything and every time and every place that exists is accessible by every single one of you. Every star system, every civilization, the past, the now, the future. That's really what this is about. It is the great awakening of our people from the slumber of what Orthodox religion and Orthodox science has taught us, all of which is wrong. So it's time for us to say, we're going to own our birthright. And our birthright is to be conscious, infinitely aware beings that can make contact with these civilizations, and all of us together doing that creates the morphogenic field that Sheldrake talks about that will move this entire planet onto the path it should have been on about 100 years ago. About 100 years ago. People say, isn't what you're doing very futuristic? I go, oh no. We're actually, I'm here. I was born in 1955. Hate to admit it, I'm that old. I was born in 1955, and I think that I came in because, guess what? We had developed hydrogen bombs, and we were on a path to destroy the whole world through mutual assured destruction. And I think that all of us who are on this planet right now, of any age, if you're between the age of puberty and senility. Most people in the room, I think. Terrible. I'm an ER doc, I say anything. All of us have that responsibility. It's a sacred responsibility. And I'm part Cherokee Indian. My connection to Gaia and the earth is really how I found spirit. And that's then how I found extraterrestrial life, or how they found me. And this story will go into. And I think that when you realize that we are here at this pivotal time, this transformative moment, where the entire world needs to move into a new level of function, where we're not going to trade the Cold War and global terrorism for interplanetary war, which is what Hollywood wants you to believe. This movie coming out, Los Angeles, the invasion of Los Angeles, or what have you. They want you to believe that there are civilizations out there that we need to fight. And this was a counterintelligence operation concocted in the 1950s when Eisenhower lost control of the secret government. And when you hear how this has been played out and how all of the people who have tried to study this issue have been pawns in a game of psychological mass indoctrination to get people to support this Manichaean view of good and bad ETs, and we have to engage in this battle. They're using the same propaganda that Goebbels used in World War II. They're using the same propaganda that was used in 9/11, and now they've completely taken over most of the UFO subculture and New Age community with that very Manichaean, black and white, us versus them paradigm. And what I want to say to you is, like the In Vogue song, free your mind. Okay? So we need to free our minds, because I think what has happened, and what's happening rapidly, especially in Los Angeles and Hollywood, is this rolling out of a replacement for humans fighting each other with people fighting aliens. Very dangerous game being played. And there's a very thin line between now and that happening. And we are that thin line. All of us in this room who are going to stand up and say, oh, wait a minute. We're not going to be fooled again, as the old rock song from the 70s said, The Who. We're not going to be fooled again. And we have to be more aware than that. And when I started talking about these things in the early 90s, there were people not happy. That one British intelligence guy said, there are people who have been killed for being too much trouble. Well, in 1992, the head of Army Intelligence came to me and said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, we're making contact with extraterrestrial civilizations free from the clusterfuck known as the United States government. And he said, oh, well, wait a minute. You have no right. I said, to whom am I to get a certification? The UN, NASA, you, a bunch of goose-stepping fascists? I said, I don't think so. I said, and if you want to know the truth, my mother's family were some of the original founders of the United States. We were the original POW with the British. Any British here? Love you. No hard feelings. So guess what? We're being very patriotic by saying the whole world needs to come together as one humanity to make peace with all these civilizations and move amongst the stars together, because that's the time that's arrived. We are at that time. And you are the people who are trying to deceive the masses through fear and the indoctrination of the mind with that virus of xenophobia and hatred. And I said, guess what? In the day it's going to be done, you have a lot of power and money, but you're not going to prevail. And I said this right to the face of the head of Army Intelligence. The following month, he offered me $2 billion if I would shut up, just shut up, and do what he asked me to do. That's true. He then went to my wife and said, you know, all sorts of flattery and chicanery. There's a board, and your husband should be on that board. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And, of course, my wife's a wonderful Jewish doctor's daughter from New Jersey, and she said, oh, he was such a nice man. I said, speaking with forked tongue. And I said, don't buy into it. I said, no. This is not. This was not nice. This is an attempt. So I basically said to him, no, not only no, but hell no, never. So we founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence in 1990 and began doing expeditions around the world in 1991, now for 20 years. And when you hear about the contact we've had and how beautiful it is and how it's happened, it's elegant, it's simple actually, and it's all really about spirit and the heart and a little bit of technology. And we're going to go through that. Tomorrow in the workshop, we're going to go very deep into it, into the remote viewing and meditation training. And I think that what people have to understand is that when you begin to do this, the extraterrestrial civilizations that are out there are going to come through that door because they want to. They're looking for people who are enlightened to make contact with them. Where do you think the Vedas came from? The ancient Sanskrit. The Rig Veda. The Sam Veda. You know, before I was a medical doctor, I was a meditation teacher. And, well, everybody else in their teens were dropping acid and chasing skirts. I was meditating 8 hours a day and learning Sanskrit and tutoring people. And so that's kind of my tradition. And what I have found is that these civilizations that are involved with the Earth have been here for thousands, hundreds of thousands, and yes, millions of years. And the Earth is very precious, and she is a living, conscious being. That is not a myth, and it's female. She is female. These extraterrestrial civilizations are here for a number of reasons. Because primarily they know we're at this point of transformation. And we're in this countdown to transformation, which is what the material we're going to go through in a moment. Because we are in this final approach where we're going to leave behind an old yuga, a 400 and some thousand year cycle, and open another cycle, the hallmarks of which are not interplanetary war, like the Scientologists and the fundamentalists and all the other people want you to believe, but universal peace. Not the division of the people of Earth against other life forms in space, but the unity of all intelligent life with the understanding we are all children of the same great being. Not a time of endless war, but a cycle of 500,000 years of unbroken peace, during which time every man, woman, and child on the planet will eventually attain cosmic consciousness and God consciousness. And we will then go out amongst the stars, going to other planets, even as those civilizations came here and gave life to Earth. And that cycle never ends. That's part of this eternal cycle. And we're at this pivotal point. But in the middle of all that, transformative energy is all this chaos. So I'm going to describe a little bit of the landscape of 2011. And the landscape is the following. Everyone knows that we're not alone. All the folks that I've met with at the CIA and in Congress, no one wants to do anything about it. Two things, knowing and doing. When I first briefed President Clinton, CIA director, on this problem in 1993, I was young and full of hope. And I thought, it's a line from The Birdcage, one of my favorites. I survived, anyway, a lot of things by looking at that movie and laughing. I survived because I thought, oh my God, here we have a CIA director and a president who really want to know and can do something. But at the end of that meeting, I gave the CIA director a briefing. It was a white paper, and it's in my first book, Extraterrestrial Contact, The Evidence and Implications. It came out about 12 years ago. It's on disclosureproject.org. You can get it. It's amazing stuff in there. All these top secret documents, everything I gave the president. And at the end of this 3-hour meeting, the CIA director said, how do we disclose that which we have no access to? He's talking about him and the President of the United States. And I said, well, you get access. He says, well, we don't know how we're going to do that. Now, at that time, I had a lot of documents and information, but they were maybe a dozen of these top secret military guys. Now we have 550 of them. If you go to disclosureproject.org, you'll see we just released the testimony of a man named Halleck who actually had the information on these implants that were being designed decades ago and put in people. Everyone thinks that they're alien implants. I said, oh no, EG&G and Siemens have been manufacturing those for decades. I know the people who designed them. And they're RF frequencies that go to satellites in space. And they're two-way because they not only monitor, but they also control. We get into this if you want to hear it. It's not a pretty story. So everything you know about this subject that you've read in books and seen in movies is wrong. And I'm going to try to share the truth, but it's going to upset some of you. And I apologize in advance. So the CIA director at the time, Woolsey, who's now basically gotten his ticket punched by Majestic, this group called Majestic that runs all the secret programs, he really didn't know what to do, and he was virtually in tears, and the president didn't know what to do. So, I put all this material together thinking at the time, well, the president will take this bull by the horns and disclose this information, and most importantly, begin a diplomatic process to make peaceful contact with these civilizations. And so Lawrence Rockefeller hosted a bunch of us out at his ranch, and I went. I mean, you can invite me anywhere, I'll go. I've been in underground bases and everything else. And I said, well, Lawrence was the nice guy in the Rockefeller family. It was his brother David that didn't want disclosure to happen because he's chasing Manhattan Bank. We'll get to this in a moment. But Lawrence was the philosopher of the family and went to Princeton with old man McDonald and McDonnell Douglas. And those guys worked with my uncle, who was on the lunar module at Northrop Grumman. Grumman was the company. There's a small world in that circle. And Lawrence hosted them, and it was Hillary, our Secretary of State, who stood up and said, stop, we do not want to hear anything more about this. This is too dangerous. And in fact, a good friend of the president's came to my home, and we were having dinner, and there's a man who stayed a lot of time at the White House with the Clintons, and if you doubt any of this, the Associated Press released documents. You can go to our website and find it from the Clinton Library. And back then it was called Project Starlight. That was the code name for the briefings I was doing for the White House and the CIA Director of Congress. And what happened is that the President sent his guy to my home and said, look, they're very supportive of what you're recommending. But they're convinced that if the President does what you're asking, he will end up like Jack Kennedy. And I burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha! I did. I thought he was making a joke. I mean, we're at the dinner table with my 4 young daughters. And he says, stop. We're not joking. I said, what? I didn't believe that at the time, honestly. He says, no, they're serious, that they cannot protect the president from this cabal. It's exactly what Senator Inouye, who you saw at the beginning, said. There's a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's free from the laws and free from the Constitution, and it's transnational. It knows no political boundaries. It's the invisible government. And that is not a conspiracy theory. That is a fact. And it's been brought out in many hearings. Now the question is, even Rumsfeld asked, where has the $2 trillion going that's missing out of the Department of Defense budget? Now this is Rumsfeld, not Abby Hoffman or some hippie. Okay? I'm sorry. It's just the frickin' Secretary of Defense said this right around 9/11. There are $2,000 billion missing out of the Department of Defense. Well, it's gone exactly into what I deal with. And it's our tax money. And we have already built the anti-gravity vehicles that can go to space and back, free energy. We've already built the generators that can run your house and car without pollution, without an electric bill, and without any global warming, and at zero cost once you put that motor in your vehicle. Why don't we have it? $600 trillion. Remember that number. That's the amount of money tied up in the global petrodollar, commodities trading, Goldman Sachs derivatives, oil in the ground, coal in the earth, nuclear power plant, electric grid, all of that. $600 trillion. For that, they will kill people. And for that, they will deceive. And for that, they have done unspeakable crimes against humanity. In fact, I have stated that what they are doing now amounts to something, a word I coined, planeticide. The deliberate killing of an entire biosphere with malice aforethought. And we have to stop it. All of us. Now, I left my medical career as an emergency doctor, and instead of making $300,000 or $400,000 a year doing that, I get paid nothing pretty much doing this. I'm lucky if I have expenses paid. And the reason I did, first of all, I was able to, thank God, did well, and I'm a very practical guy. But I decided that Earth is now our patient. All of you who are healers in here, the Earth is our patient, and her 7 billion children. And I could spend the rest of my life taking care of heart attacks and car wrecks and stabbings and shootings and the gun and knife club, we used to call it. Or we can focus on this, and in one pivotal move, bring out peaceful contact, disclosure, and all of these sciences and technologies that are going to liberate the Earth from the shackles of the economic slavery that we're all living under. We are. And make no mistake about it. I mean, the people in Egypt, God bless them, have overthrown, tried, to get rid of Mubarak. But what they don't understand is that that was just a less affluent plantation than the American plantation. But they were all plantations. And there are 200 or 300 families and corporations that control more than half of the net worth of the world. There are 4 people, the 4 richest people in the world, whose net worth exceeds the 57 poorest countries in the world. 57 countries, 4 people. There is the greatest asymmetry in the history of planet Earth. And what they want to do is keep everybody kind of fed and watered like a potted palm and hope they don't notice. But we're noticing, and we're waking up. And there is this awakening all over the world. Many people don't know what they're awakening to, and that's why we need to provide another vision. It's the vision that must guide the world out of this crazy time into a new era. A time of unbroken universal peace and of abundance. Because guess what? When there is honest disclosure on not just, gee, I saw a UFO. Guess what? People ask me, when is disclosure going to happen? I have a really important announcement today. It's already done. We did it. I did it at the request of members of the Majestic and at the request of the President of the United States and at the request of the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said, we can't do this, you can. And I said, what do you mean? And what they really meant was, you're expendable and we're not. I was told that. So I'm the throwaway, because I'm not important. And I would say that with all humility. I'm not important. So in other words, I was the person who could do it and risk being killed, but they were not going to risk the life of the president. You get it? All right, so the only currency that matters is moral courage. And let me share with you, how many folks were at the Obama's inauguration? Yeah, it was awesome. I was there at some kind of event happening here. I was there with false, interesting stuff. Okay, anyway, am I on? Am I hot?
That mic is dying.
Oh, is my mic?
Yep.
Oh. What was that? It was a full battery. Yeah, they can hear me. I think it's just that speaker. Maybe it's where I'm standing. Maybe a little bit of WSFM. Can you hear me? All right. There's a great term, WSFM. Sounds like a radio station. A little echoic there. It isn't. WSFM stands for, and this is actually what the agency and within the contracting world in these corporations, they call this science. It's weird science and frickin' magic. Weird science and frickin' magic. Always remember WSFM, I'm not kidding you. If you go into a skiff, where they take all your electronics and it's an eaves, you can't, get any electromagnetic signals in or out of the place, except under a controlled setting. That's called a skiff, a secure communication intelligence facility, SCIF, SCIF. I know a lot of guys who work in SCIFs now, and they spend their whole lives in SCIFs. And that's what they work on, or WSFM. Energy from the vacuum, energy from the expansion of space-time, anti-gravity, the ability to materialize and dematerialize things. We've been doing this since the turn of the last century. Since 1908, we have had free energy. Since the 1920s, we have had anti-gravity, and we can prove it. T. Townsend Brown was doing experiments with very high voltage systems making things float. Go to the OrionProject.org. You're going to have your mind blown away at the dispositive evidence that is on there in the history of all this free energy that we have. Anti-gravity vehicles made by humans, at least since the 50s. I know guys who have piloted them out of Dugway in Utah and out of Area 51, no one calls it that, Pahut Mesa. And guess what? We don't need to be flying United Airlines from LA to X to DC. You know, taking 5 hours. We could be there in about 5 or 10 minutes. Absolutely. Faster than that, actually. But, if any of this were to be released, including the healing technologies that we have that are WSFM, Weird Science and Frickin' Magic, that can regenerate a spinal cord or a limb or get rid of cancer and AIDS, we have this stuff. Guess what? That area of science is the forbidden city. And I wrote a book, my autobiography is called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge. Any filmmakers here, make that into a movie instead of the stupid invasion of Los Angeles, and you really see something. And the point is that we do not need to have any of those things, but the courage that's needed to stand down a $600 trillion global behemoth that really runs the whole macroeconomy of the earth, this is difficult. This is really dramatic. You know, I thought when a child died in my arms was tough. This is really tough stuff. And serious, really serious stuff. So, when the president was inaugurated, I was there with my family, my wife, and one of my daughters, and we were there, the Sunday before when Bono of U2 was playing, and Stevie Wonder, and there were a couple million people there, and on the Jumbotrons, there was a wonderful quote from Robert Kennedy, whose son I just met at Sundance a couple weeks ago, and mentioned to him a letter I have from Bobby Kennedy that he needs to have. And you need to have it too. I have so much stuff. I probably forget more than most people want to know about this stuff. Anyway, but look at this quote, the beautiful quote that Obama, you put up on all the Jumbotrons. 2 million people saw this. Few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. Yet it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change a world which yields most painfully to change. Robert Kennedy, 1966. Now, when Bobby Kennedy Jr. was at Sundance on the same stage I spoke at, and he was there with Harry Belafonte, and they were talking about a movie which he was supporting called The Last Mountain. Great documentary about how the last mountain, big mountain in West Virginia, is about to be blown up with what they call MTR, mountaintop removal, so they can scour that last bit of coal. 50% of our electricity is coming from coal still, friends, like in the 1800s. And I turned to Bobby Kennedy and I said, look, I have a letter from, but I said, also, we have the solution, and it's what your dad and your uncle died trying to get out. And that is free energy, and it's all based on the science behind UFOs. Now, this means that you've got to take this on in a very wise way. It's playing chess in 38 dimensions. So what I did to stay alive and get this far, not that I'm attached to life, because when I was 17 I died and had a near-death experience, and it was beautiful and wonderful. Anyway, so here I am. What I think that you have to remember is that we have to first have the masses and millions of people know the truth, and then take action to change the reality. When the people lead, the leaders belatedly will follow. Very rarely do leaders, political, wealthy, connected leaders, take the charge on something where they're going to have to take on the folks who are putting the butter on their bread. All right? So this is the problem in Washington and on capitals throughout the world and in large corporations and with very wealthy people I've met with, people who are billionaires, is that even the ones who want to see this happen will say, yes, but it's too dangerous, and I don't think I can do it. Or there are people who are senators who have told me, I'm just a senator on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I said, just a senator? You're one of 100 people in the upper chamber of the most powerful government in the world, allegedly. And you took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. And I'm giving you prima facie evidence that there was a rogue, illegal, out-of-control group that is keeping this secret and is destroying the earth by doing so. I said, what are you going to do about it? And invariably they will say, well, this is too big of a fish for me to reel in. In fact, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, the former Minister of Defense of Canada, I've been working with for a number of years, found out about disclosure, got very involved, and he went to a senator in Canada who was on the military committee for Canada. And the guy said, you know what, I've got a 5-pound line, and you're asking me to reel in a 2,000-pound whale. I can't do it. So what I have found is that everyone wants to know, nobody wants to act or do. And this is where we come in, the people. Because unless you own $1 trillion oil field, if you have the ability to be awake, you have the ability to make contact. And you have the ability to network disclosure to everyone you know. Because if you go to disclosureproject.org, you're going to see dozens. We have 110 of these top secret witnesses in digital videotape. We have thousands of government documents. We have this positive proof of the existence of these sciences and technologies which are being criminally withheld from the people of the earth, never mind from the Americans who have paid $2 trillion to develop them. And it is really time for us to take matters now into our own hands, we the people. We the people. If we really know what that means, that's what we can do. I want to share with you something that most people think is a joke. If you talk to your usual most of my family's, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, blah, blah, blah. And, I call it the hidebound people who think they know everything because they have an Ivy League degree. No offense to any of you folks who are from that pedigree. But they think their shit doesn't stink because they have a degree from Harvard. And, I got news for them. They're usually the last to know. Listen to this. This was just released from the American Federation of Scientists, a mainstream scientific organization. And this is a report from their head of government secrecy. Okay? And I'm going to quote just briefly. There were 5,135 inventions that were under secrecy orders at the end of fiscal year 2010. The U.S. Patents and Trademark Office told Secrecy News last week. This includes something from 1991 that was a solar generator, photovoltaic, and this is quoting, that would have gotten 20% more efficiency than a conventional solar cell. Not free energy, not anti-gravity, not dematerialization, none of that, just 20% more efficiency. This from one of the most mainstream scientific organizations in the United States. It's at the orionproject.org. Go look it up. It's there. I'm not making this up. Why? Because the price point for coal and oil would have been overtaken by solar if they had not slapped a secrecy order on that photovoltaic generator in 1971. So when people, it's great, we have a Prius and it's wonderful, but, let's face it, it's junk. And, no offense to Toyota, but relatively speaking, it's junk. What we ought to have under the hood of that vehicle is an electromagnetic generator accessing the zero-point free energy field where you never have to plug it in, you never have to charge it, you never have a power bill, and it runs and it runs and it runs. Electric motors can last 100 years, no problem, if they're made properly. And they have more torque and horsepower than a gas one, by the way. Size for size. Cubic centimeter per cubic centimeter. So basically, what we have to do is insist that this come out. A senior member of Congress who had been until the changing of the guard last month in Washington, chairman of one of the powerful committees in the Congress and who's a supporter of our project, his very good friend, who for years was a Department of Energy official, called me. And this woman told me that she had been in a facility near Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Department of Energy, where there were dozens, if not hundreds, of these type of free energy generators and devices that had been developed and or confiscated from the public. This is not an urban myth. And so when you realize that we are all living in a world that is dying, being choked to death by people who want to control it and own it, and people say, is it really about the money? I go, no, not about the money. It's about the power. Because when you start talking about trillions and hundreds of trillions of dollars, you're talking about a macroeconomic system of who's calling the shots. And they do not want every village in Africa and India to have free energy. Okay? And where suddenly the 600 million people in Europe and America, compared to the 7 billion people on the earth, actually have to get along with in sheer power in the world. It's about macroeconomic power. It is, at its core, racist. It is xenophobic. It is destroying the planet.